So you both prepared, to my understanding, short statements, and then the audience and we can respond to it and have a conversation. Sorry? Yeah.
The question is actually like how can ethnographic museums, how should they react to certain politics of exclusion and inclusion that are happening in current times? And I thought that actually this is kind of a very big question that can go into many different directions. So I thought that rather talking about it from a theoretical perspective, I would like to provide a glimpse into how we at the World Museum Vienna dealt with this very difficult question, which is very relevant to us, especially since the last years, as as Claudia already mentioned yesterday, have been refurbishing and reestablishing our permanent exhibition galleries, and we also have one exhibition space that is called World on the Move, dedicated to topics such as migration and globalization, where we discussed actually a lot about this question. So I'll provide a glimpse into how we thought up certain strategies that we could implement. So our basic stance, first of all, is that migration and globalization isn't just a recent phenomenon that is just happening since the 21st century, but that it is an integral part of humanity, and that the world is a connected world, and that maybe even that cultures are becoming nowadays less and less bounded to specific territories. So this is the basic stance that we want to communicate. We have two rooms. One is dedicated to changing temporary exhibitions with different communities, so that can act as kind of a place for self-representation. And the other room is more semi-permanent, which means that there is the basic architecture that is fixed, but it's kind of easy to change objects, to change labels and graphics, and of course the digital content. So in this semi-permanent room, in the center, we show objects from our collections. For example, we show a selection of objects, historic objects that are characterized by having or incorporating multiple places within them, objects that cannot be reduced to only one specific place or one specific origin. So, for example, we chose goods that are made out of materials coming from very different places, or we chose goods that were manufactured in one region but for the market in a completely different region, or we show religious objects that are for example different images of Buddha all over the world, to show that there is I don't know, to demonstrate this global distribution of religious ideas. So, our idea here was that on the one hand, because they're historic objects, we wanted to show that, of course, definitely exactly this idea that the connected world isn't something new, but it's already existing since a long time. But on the other hand, these objects also serve as kind of a way to indirectly self-reflect upon our own institution and its structure, and especially its ordering principle, which is based on regional territories. And we can ask ourselves if this is still timely, or if maybe, or what is the positive side of it, or if maybe it can even be a hindrance to thinking about interconnectedness and exchange. So this is the first part. And the second part is taking place along the wall. It's more focused on the question of migration. And we developed 6 stations that are dealing with different aspects of migration. While developing these stations, we were talking about a lot about how to talk about migration and how can we, and about ways to include voices from different communities. And I find that, when talking about inclusion of communities at museums, as we heard a lot about today already, the outcome are very often programs that are aimed towards very large social groups, like diaspora communities or migrant communities or migrants, like very large social group. They're actually very diverse, as Barbara mentioned before. And so when I think about the question that is raised, or when I think about it in the light of the question that was raised, we have to think about, or find that such broad generalization can be quite problematic as we create this essentializing image of migrant culture, as we create this image of a homogeneous group of people. So, and the thing is that this homogeneous group of people stand maybe outside of the visitor's perspective. I think this is like an important point, because it's when we present and when we talk about migration, we present it in a way that it's happening outside of the visitor's reality. So this is, I think, very important. So I think we need to think about rhetorical and methodological strategies to talk about it. So our strategy was to include the individual visitors via interactive stations and pose them direct questions about their lives. So that way we don't talk about like an imagined migrant community, but we try to position the visitor within the topic of migration, not to create this we and us dichotomy. And yes, and so I think that way the goal is like to locate the topic of migration within the life reality of the visitor. And for example, we have a station dedicated to war and to emigration due to war and persecution, where the visitor can where there's like an interactive visualization about wars and conflicts from 1900 until the present, and and alongside of this interactive station, we ask the visitor, what does peace mean to you, or when would you leave your home? So this is like a practical example of what I'm talking about. On the one hand, the visitor needs to be active to get the information, and on the other hand, we also try to make him, to put him into the position of somebody who has to ask this question, or to himself, or to herself. And yeah, so this is, we thought that this might be kind of a good strategy or a good basis to start discussions about migration and globalization, and experiment also with our collections. Yeah.
Can I, because it's a conversation, can I ask you something? Because I'm interested in how contemporary migration flows are incorporated in museums, how museums engage with them. So this is what I prepared a statement about, and I gathered some examples from European museums and cultural institutions, and how they respond and reflect on the refugee crisis, what terminology they use, what kind of exhibition strategies they have, or collecting efforts they've started. So how is the contemporary present, except, outside of visitors, who are of course contemporary bodies, but have you collected the contemporary around topics of migration and war, or?
Well, yeah, we have several. We have several stations where you can see the contemporary as well. Like, for example, I mean, we include voices with a video wall where we ask different people who have like a migration background or who work with migrants or who are artists working around the topic of migration to give us statements that we include in the exhibition, to have contemporary voices, and also like to include this multivocality. But we also have more contemporary objects that we show. For example, we have a station where we ask how do we, is it possible or how do we collect globalization? Where we show objects from different African countries, from Kenya and Burkina Faso, that are all surrounding the election of Barack Obama. And in the station we raised the question about how does one political event in one place have an effect on many different other places in the world? And how does it affect like local material culture? And could this be a possible way for museums to collect globalization? So this is also, I think, kind of a contemporary example. And then, of course, we have this, as I mentioned, this other room with changing temporary exhibitions where we invite communities and where I think we will deal with more present or more more contemporary issues.
Cecile, could you perhaps also give us some examples of the interactive, what people have been giving back to the museum, or like
it's
what
not
kind
open,
of?
It's not open yet.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no. We're still in the preparation phase. We're still. We will open in October 2017, and at the moment we're still in the process of conceptualizing and. Yeah.
And do you also do like, do you prepare interviews, or is it really open to people to actually, as visitors, to respond and become part of the exhibition? Is it prepared? Is it like a curated intervention of audiences, or is it just really open to anyone who visits the museum?
No, it's curated. There are actually, I mean, I would say it's designed. Like there are certain stations where, for example, we have one station where we ask the visitor, where do you come from and where do your grandparents come from? And you have like a world map, and you can take like little flags and put the flags on the different spaces in order to kind of create a visual image of the diverse origins of our visitors. Or we have another station where it's about language diversity, and there is a screen where or there's a question that asks a visitor, in what language do you dream, or which is the language that you dream in? And the visitor can type in the language, and then it's kind of I think it's called like you know, when you see like all the different languages that were typed in by the visitors, and the one that is typed in the most is the largest. I think it's called Wordle.
Yeah.
Like this,
is it like does it become like a cloud where you see all the different?
It becomes like a cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still in the process. We still don't know exactly how it will look like or how the media production companies will do it. But yeah.
So this is your proposal, at least, to the future proposition of the museum of how to respond to exclusionary politics, the contemporary issues that are happening today in Europe. Perhaps, Lisa, maybe you want to propose your statement
maybe
as well?
I will keep it very brief because I think everyone is ready for lunch. But in the previous presentations, we've seen that museums are places where the nation can be imagined and narrated, or the European continent, or national identity. And I'm interested in how refugee stories might enter this canon, national canon, and disrupt it or change it. Now, I don't have an answer to that yet, but I started just gathering all the responses of museums. I just have some pictures with me. I broadly divided it into 3 categories, but let's go to the last one. I think this is a really good example, by the way, of inclusive practices. and also of performing citizenship. This is an interactive map that was made by refugees in residents of the House of Leo in collaboration with Huis der Cultuur der Welt. And it's a map in which people can navigate, well, actually refugees can navigate through the city, which is geared at their specific needs. And I think that is quite a good example of a performative citizenship that might also change, citizenship. But I was especially struck by some exhibitions and programs that staged a performance or an experience of being a refugee. And this is a permanent exhibition in Humanity House in The Hague, where they set up a sort of theatrical exhibition, taking you as a visitor through the stages of leaving your homeland, which is in conflict. And as you can see, it's quite dramatic with the lighting, and it evokes all the senses. So it really plays with your emotions. And the Trope Museum this year created, in collaboration with a theater group, a play also around a refugee. It was based on a book by Dave Eggers about the Sudanese refugee. And it took place at several spots within the museum, but it ended outside of the museum with a scene involving a real boat from Lampedusa, so a real boat that refugees used. And I'm interested in questioning whether it is necessary to experience what it means to be a refugee in order for us to...
First of all, the question is, that's possible?
No, indeed. Whether it's even possible, of course. Whether it's possible, whether it's ethical. But this is what is happening, though. And it seems that these kind of emotional experiences might lead to more empathy or more tolerance. But wait, I'm not finished with my statement. I know you're annoyed. But what my statement is, and this ties in with what Engin just said about discursive spaces, is that I think the refugee crisis is not only the story of the other, it is also a story about ourselves, and we are implicated in this crisis. And so my question is it the refugee that needs to be experienced? Or is it us? Maybe we should perform ourselves. If we're talking about inclusiveness, I think both positions should be performed.
First of all, if I
Can we have the questions just...
Yeah.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
did you finish your
Yeah,
statement?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe Lisa, you could give her the microphone and then she can make her counter statement.
Sorry if I was interruptive. But first of all, I think of course it's a matter of looking at ourselves, then also it's a matter of the refugee and ourselves. I mean, who is ourselves and the refugee? Also is focusing, I think, much on a certain category, a certain imagery, with a boat and everything. I mean, me and my colleague, we are involved in this kind of processes of turning people's stories together with them into artistic and public presentations, and together with museums and so on. But a refugee, even we can talk about, and not maybe we, as I can assume that's in this sense, I mean you and me, who maybe do not have a refugee background. There are people who says to be a refugee is a certain experience in a certain part of my life. Newcomers have a different story. Everybody has different stories, so cannot make a homogenized category of the refugee and ourselves, because there's many individual stories. Then again, there's And it reminds me of the question what she just posed about the Nigerian thing, about the generation difference. There's generation difference. There's differences if somebody lives here for 40 years or came 1 year ago and still trying to, you know. So yeah, of course, it's a question of looking at ourselves. And yeah, I also think that's actually for me the same relevance to self-reflection is in the last discussion about colonialist museum projects and decolonizing the different parts or dimensions of society, including museum.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, do you want to perhaps also comment to that, or is it?
No, I mostly agree to it.
Yeah.
Really, I do. And but I think this was really the projects I looked at were really aimed at current influx of refugees. But then still, I mean, they do generalize and homogenize many different voices and stories into one more conceptual idea, which is very mediatized as well. If you look at indeed the boats that they use, and I mean, I find it quite problematic that we in museums have a tendency to stage the authentic. So we want to use original objects as if we can use the imagination, but we really have to use these vessels of pain, the pain of others, to come close to it. I find that, quite problematic.
But this is, just to tie into that, this is also societal. I mean, it's a question that situates the museum into what's currently happening in society. And I think we, of course, are also conditioned in how do we perform empathy in our various societies. Because I think both of you, I mean, I'm not sure if you're both speaking about the same kind of current waves of refugees, and perhaps how, Cecile, how do you respond to what Lisa was speaking about, and also how does that relate to your future project at the museum?
I don't know. I mean, what I always hear, but since the whole day already, is like this question of how to, like how should we do it, and it's really difficult to find. I think what is lacking maybe a little bit are like practical examples of how to. And
well, you're sitting there, so and
yeah,
I get to ask that.
I tried to present like a practical example about how we could do it maybe, but of course I think it always depends on the specific context, and it always depends on what exactly you want to say.
But specifically
I think
you.
what is I've been like, when I listened to Lisa, I was thinking about something that I read recently from this new book of Peggy Levitt, Artifacts and Allegiances, where she says that maybe like something that what we need is maybe kind of a new vocabulary to talk about nationality that doesn't stop at the national border. Like, I mean, we live in a time where more and more people have transnational lives, where, I mean, people are living in one place and working in one place, but maybe they have like still political or socioeconomic ties to another place. And so I think it's really kind of a vocabulary about how to talk about these life realities in ethnographic museums, and also, since we are a museum, how to visually talk about it, like how to find visual strategies to talk about it without making this division that everybody's talking about. Yeah.
Thank you. We actually, I got the message from Wayne that we have to round it up.